It is time for some commentary today from JEAN-FRANÇOIS LISÉE, our feature brought to you by the folks at Guaranteed Industries, reminding you residential, commercial, industrial, they take care of it all, sales, service, installation, so give them a call and be prepared for whatever the weather brings. Guaranteed Industries, 514-342-3400, online, guaranteedindustries.com. Monsieur Lisée, I thought we'd start today with the subject that is, for whatever reason, got everyone in the National Assembly buzzing, and that's this whole issue of gender-neutral bathrooms. Paul St. Pierre Plamondon went to town on this like it's the biggest issue that the PQ has, and I'm kind of curious to have your reaction to what he has said, which is calling for a parliamentary, commission on this, and what you thought of that.
Well, I must confess that I was the first to call for that in a column in Le Devoir back in late May, early June, because I wrote a column about drag queens, and I said, there's no problem with drag queens reading books to children if, there's nothing vulgar or sexual about it, and they're reading books that are approved in the curriculum. But if they're trying to teach gender theory to the kids, well, then that would be a problem, but there's no proof of that. And I was inundated with parents and teachers and others saying, well, you just don't know what's going on in the schools. And I did, for 2 or 3 weeks, I researched the issue, and I was baffled by the amount of gender theory that is actually in the sexuality curriculum in the Quebec schools. And I even heard a recording of a guest speaker for 5-year-olds trying to convince them that sex was not something that is fixed at birth, not gender, not sexual orientation, but sex itself. But it was simply determined by society. And so I said, well, that's pretty early. And I read all the material, and the material for K to 12 is gender theory is the normalized only thing that is being taught in sexuality, plus all the other aspects of sexual education, of course. And I was really appalled by the fact that the theory that is interesting to debate at the university level is seen as a certain fact taught to our children.
You know, Monsieur Lisée, that most children, when they start to have questions about this, about their own sexuality, their own gender, it can happen. The average age, they say, is around 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. And what I found very troubling is that now stereotypes, male and female stereotypes, are seen as something negative that have to be deconstructed in elementary and secondary education. And there are terms like heteronormativity, and there's nothing in the 600 pages that I've read that I were given to educators that say, there are stereotypes, but there are types. There are male and female types that can be affirmed and that can be open, and there is none of that. So really, there's a kind of bias. It's what I call queer normativity. That heterosexuality is criticized, and queer normativity is affirmed. So that's part of the problem. And the other problem is that as soon as a child voices uncertainty about gender, the only path is gender affirmation. And as you know, after 14 years old, if a child decides to start medical treatment or at least puberty blockers, the school has to protect the anonymity and not tell the parents. And what I found very disturbing, and others that I interviewed for this long piece that you can find on my blog, jflisée.org, is that the precaution principle is not applied. It's full steam ahead if you have a doubt, instead of saying, listen, that's a good discussion to have. Let's not rush things. And we know that in very many cases, youngsters who are ambivalent about their gender will come back to their initial gender in the end.
Yeah, but it's a good thing to be having these conversations. It's a good thing to create a place where kids feel safe to talk about the things that they're wondering about.
Yes, but only if the precaution principle is part of the discussion. And it is not. It is not. It's gender transition affirmation that is the new norm. So that's why as you know, countries like Sweden and Norway and the UK, who were very far ahead in gender affirmation, have made a complete turn. And what I say is that, listen, let's have a transpartisan, open-minded discussion like we had on end-of-life treatment and like we had on conjugal violence.
Okay.
And we can do great things when we just start on these difficult issues in a transpartisan way. And that's, I think, that's the way to go.
All right. I want to move from that before we run out of time, and I appreciate, you weighing in on that. The other story kind of made me smile today and watching everyone's reaction. This this CJEP in Quebec City launching its English Week. And I love when François Legault was asked about this and said, maybe it's not a good idea. I think that's as much as he was willing to say. What did you think about this? What do you think about this?
Well, I'm going to tell you. But what was incredible, it's a piece of anthology that in the same area, in the same hall, you have the language minister, Jean-François Robert, saying, that there's nothing wrong about that. And then the camera shifts to the minister responsible for CJEDs and universities and says, this should not happen. Yeah. They're in the same hall saying opposite things at the same time. Can you just coordinate, on an issue that was clearly going to be brought up because it was in the paper this morning. And so the premier had to intervene in an anti-English bias. My position is that the college has a French Literature Week, it has French Songs Week, it has Science Week, it has Theater Week, and it has English Week. So these are all things that are taught in CJED. My only reaction is that, I hope there's a French Week in Dawson and other English CJEDs. That would be my only thing. That's my only reaction, English is an obligatory subject matter in CJED. So that's a fact. So it should be at some point, brought about saying, okay, let's try to have a week where we will accelerate our knowledge of English. There's no problem with that.
As long as it's the same thing on the other side.
That sounds fair to me.
Very diplomatically handled, Monsieur Lisée. All right. Thank you so much for the time. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.